Welcome to She's Got This, the podcast for ambitious women who want to grow and scale their business and use the power of intentional energy direction to design their very best life. I'm your host, Christine Gallagher, award-winning business coach and mindset mentor to female entrepreneurs. If you're ready to own your brilliance while making bank, step into the absolute best version of you and become a force for positive change in the world, you're in the right place. Let's do it. Welcome, everybody, to the newest episode of She's Got This. I'm your host, Christine Gallagher. We have a very special guest today with us. Her name is Tanya Alvarez. And let me tell you about Tanya because her bio, when I read it, was really stunningly, wow. It was one of those bios where I was like, she has done a lot. And she started out really young, age 25, and she self-funded her own New York ad agency using credit cards. And she actually went from $0 to $1 million revenue in the first year. Amazing. And along the way, not only doing that, she also traveled to 42 countries. She completed the Boston Marathon and the New York City Marathon and a Half Ironman, just for good measure, all while battling a brittle bone condition. So she has a classic underdog story. And what Tanya's mission is to really help you understand how you can own your own life and not just your business. So she has a company called OwnersUP, and through that company, she aims to empower people to win not only at work, while not losing at home. I love that, by the way. But she also utilizes facilitated accountability sprints, which she's going to tell us more about what that means, to scale your business in a way that is sane and enable you to live your ideal life now. And we love that. And we love talking about scaling here at She's Got This. So you are in the right place. Welcome, Tanya, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to hear all about this. When you were 25, to self-fund and open up your own ad agency, kind of like, where did that come from? And was that something that was planned, or was it kind of like, one day I'm going to do this? How did that come about?
Yeah, it was quite unique because I went to Wellesley College, and most people from there end up being a lawyer, a management consultant, the typical path. And there wasn't really much startups. And I graduated in 2000, and that's when the internet busted.
Yeah.
So I declined like offers to work at American Express, all these companies. So I was like, oh, let me see whatever startups are still around, and I'm just going to work my butt off on those startups and learn as much as I can, because I didn't want to go the MBA route. I thought experience might be the best way to go about it. And then what ended up happening is after I got a bunch of experience, I kind of was like, ooh, I think I'm ready to start my own thing. But I was so nervous. So I asked my mother, I was like, my mother who's just been always my inspiration and kind of like my biggest cheerleader. It's like, I want to start my own thing. And she's like, go ahead and do it. And I was like, what happens if I fail? And she's like, you'll be exactly where you are right now, working for someone. I was like, okay. And what happens if nobody wants to hire me? And she said, well, you wouldn't want to work for a company like that. And I was like, so she made me go through kind of like in my head, like, what's a worst case scenario? And even if, how bad is it? And so from there, I just took the leap. And I was like, all right, let's do this. And I didn't have some rich uncle or any family member. So if I was going to fail, it was going to be bad. So what I ended up doing is just, I kind of like was like full on, like making sure I made the progress I needed to do. And of course I had a lot of like cheerleaders, a lot of accountability champions, I would call them, and to help me move forward.
Yeah. And it's so interesting where I think we're a similar age because I also graduated college in 2000. And you're right, that was a crazy time where it was like the dot-com boom and then the dot-com bust was happening at that same time. So it was a very interesting time to be kind of launched out into the world and graduating and things like that. And your mom sounds very cool, by the way. Your mom sounds like an awesome cheerleader who's, very wise. So that's a major bonus to have that in your life. So tell us a little bit about, well, I want to talk about several different things. Accountability groups is one of the things that we mentioned. But one of the things that my clients struggle with, and a lot of people struggle with just in life, is sort of making things a priority and knowing what order things should be in. Like a question I often get from clients who first come to work with me is like, how do I know what needs to come first, second, third? How do I prioritize all of these things that I want to do and want to accomplish? So, what advice could you give, being somebody who started off young and really, again, achieved such amazing things? What do you do when there's so many bright, shiny objects? If the allure of all the shiny things is all around, how do you help people and help yourself navigate through all the distractions that are out there?
Well, definitely. This is a simple 3-minute thing you can do at the end of a day, and I call it the wrap. So R is like actually review. What the heck did you get done today? Because some days I'm just kind of like, whoa, that was a crazy day. And then I can't even remember what happened. So if I didn't jot it down, how the heck am I going to remember or change it, right? And then A is assess 1 to 5. Like 5, you're having an amazing day. Like write down, like, why was it amazing? Amazing. So you can reverse engineer that day and have more days like that. So like, let's say all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe at 12 o'clock to like 4 o'clock, I'll like every Friday I have back-to-back podcasts. I'm like, okay, great. I'm going to have Fridays like jamming like that every single time, reverse engineer that. And then P is to prioritize the 3 things that you need to get done the next day. Like really, if you had to cut off at 12 p.m., you got up at 9, you had to finish at 12. What are the 3 things that you had to get done to move your business forward? And if you do that simple thing, not only are you going to be more self-aware, like of course, what you measure, you improve, but you start
Yeah.
seeing, oh, wow, that was not a good use of my time. I need to delegate that. Yeah, that was a shiny object that took me down a rabbit hole. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so you end up this simple practice, you become more self-aware, you're better at your time, and you prioritize it.
I love that. I love that. I'm writing that down. RAP. It's good and it's easy to remember. Nice. I love having little processes like that, like just like little simple things you can go back to, and then you can easily remember what each thing is for.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful as well. I love that. So yeah, I think that so much today is distraction. I mean, it used to be that the distraction was the media. It was, the news, and it was magazines, and it was television. And now, of course, we have everything on the internet, and we have everything with social media. That's an even bigger distraction. And so I guess a sort of a side question off of this for you would be, how have you personally dealt with the age of social media and the fact that there is so much going on? Are you naturally somebody who can kind of shut that out and sort of be like on task and on focus? Or has that come into play at all with your business and your life as far as getting in the way?
That is a great question. So I think one thing that I do to make myself more aware, because we all have it, like all these companies pay engineers tons of money to hijack our focus.
Yeah.
And I've been there where, like, let's say I post a LinkedIn post and I'm like, oh, let me find a photo. And then here I am, like 1 hour later, looking at my kids' photos. I'm like, what the heck just happened? Like, I literally, that wasn't even like social media. That was just me in Google Photos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I do in that example, for example, I'll do a post and then I will have my virtual assistant find the photo for me. And so I have a folder that's basically all the pictures that that person can use. And so
Yeah.
now I won't go into that kind of rabbit hole like, oh, look at my daughter, look at my son, right? So you have to be really aware of what hijacks your focus. And sometimes we can't blame it on social media. It's just us kind of getting curious, right?
Right. Yeah, totally. And I can relate to that because I go down rabbit holes really easily. I am the person who, I'll be looking something up and suddenly I'll find like a Reddit thread in like some subreddit, and I'll be like deep into this Reddit and like going through all these things, and I'm like, wait a minute, like an hour has just gone past and that's not what I wanted to be doing for the last hour. So I love that idea of having that awareness, right? Like having the awareness of where you can get off track and where you can slip down those rabbit holes. And then having, again, it's something simple, it's just a folder, but having somebody on your team knowing that you can send them to that place, that you don't need to be doing that. You don't need to be the one who is doing that. And so, that's just one form of delegation, right? Which is another
Yeah.
biggie. As far as keeping yourself on task and prioritized. And I know, again, with a lot of people that I work with in the beginning, and this happened with me too, it's easy to say, you know what? I'll just do it. I can do it. I can do it. And I'll probably do it quicker and better. And I heard this phrase from one of my mentors in the past, and I just thought this was so key. And it's a little controversial because people be like, what do you mean? But they said, as long as that person on your team is doing 80% of what you would have done, like you're good. And so the perfectionist in me was like, oh no, that's not good enough when I first heard that, but it's actually true, right? It's like no one's going to do the things maybe exactly as you would or as perfect as you would. But an example like that is perfect, where it's like it's a picture, like, yeah, you could probably get in there and put your insight and pick the perfect one, but have somebody else doing that for you, right? And social media is a perfect example because a lot of it is visual and you need to have that visual aspect. But again, that's something that somebody else can be doing for you. So yeah, I really love that.
And on that topic, I think people wait until they're at capacity to
Yeah, they
hire
do.
their virtual assistant.
They
That
do.
should be when, if you're not even at like 5K monthly, you
Mm-hmm,
should hire
mm-hmm.
a virtual assistant. And people
Oh,
are
for
like,
sure.
why would you do that? And it's like, because it's all the activities you need to do consistently. Like I did
Yeah.
this whole workshop that was free. Anyone can DM me on my Instagram for that one, and I'll give you the resources for that. But that should be your first hire. And it's not that expensive. People
It's
assume
not.
that it's like thousands of dollars. It is not. And one thing, especially now with AI, like you
Mm-hmm.
can go to Loom. And so anytime I have a task that I think I'm the only one who can do, I just record myself with Loom and speak it out, and then I save it in a folder.
Yeah.
And then with AI, you can like literally have your VA do it, or you have SOPs. So then now you'll never have to do that task again.
I know. That's amazing. That's an amazing tip right there, guys. Like, listen, AI, first of all, is like this crazy thing we can do a whole episode on right now.
Yeah.
But just like that small tip, like some things AI can really whip something up quickly. And it's okay. Like, I know there's controversy over AI because people are like, oh, it's like some computers just spitting out this stuff. But like for something like that, that's something you can definitely, handle. And I think that it's an important point you also made about people waiting too long. Like I know for me, I waited until I was in business for 2 years, which looking back, I can't even believe, but I was afraid, and I was probably making at that point when I decided to hire my first VA, I was probably making probably about the 4,000 or so a month place. And I look back and I'm like, why was I so scared? But it just felt like such a big deal. And I ended up working with a woman who was a newer VA, and she basically did my newsletter. That was all she did. And it was like $150 a month. And I look back and I'm like, what was I afraid of? But it like again, it felt like a big decision, but just know that like virtual assistants can be found for like very reasonable rates, depending on like how long they've been doing what they're doing. And they can take so much off your plate that even if it's just one thing, like I started with just my newsletter because I didn't want to be bogged down in the back end stuff. That freed me up to, of course, focus on more like client getting activities and revenue generating activities so that I wasn't stuck in the doing the admin myself. So, big tip there is hire probably before you feel like you're ready and know that it's not like you're not hiring an employee, right? You're not paying like health insurance, all these things, unless you decide to go that route. But VAs are amazing, and you can find them out there to do for reasonable rates, doing things that will really move you forward that you don't have to be doing. So I'm glad that you brought that up because a lot of people get terrified about it, about their first hire. So yeah, hire before you're ready. You talk about something called the focus multiplier. I wanted to touch on that because this is another one of your sort of strategies or tactics which really helps your productivity. So tell me more about what that's about.
So part of it is the wrap, and the other part is really understanding, having an accountability partner to help you really focus in. I think that we all assume like, I didn't know this until I got married, until I started like meeting other people, and I started realizing, wow, not everybody has a really supportive family. So what I
Yeah.
mean by that is sometimes your family might be supportive, but they might be like, don't do that in entrepreneurship. I want you to have a steady job, or I want you to whatever, but they're just protecting you. It's not that
Yeah.
they're not loving you or supporting you, they're just protecting you. So they might not encourage you, and or your friends might not understand or they want to spend more time with you, whatever it is. And sometimes you need to build your own accountability. And even if you have an amazing friend who's in accountability, but then they're so used to you that you could say, I had a crazy day, something happened. They're like, oh, totally understand. You know what? Why don't you get that task done the next day?
Yeah, they'll let you off
Oh,
the hook.
yeah, they let you off the hook, and it's not their fault because they're like, they totally understand. They're so invested in you and your relationship that they probably just, looking out for your emotional well-being. But honestly, you really need somebody to hold those boundaries to not
Yeah.
let you off the hook. And that's really hard.
It is really hard, and I think it's important to talk about that as well. This idea that not everyone in your life is going to necessarily support or understand what you're doing, and they do usually come from a place of love and wanting you to be protected and safe. So I'm glad you mentioned that because it can bring up a lot of sort of angst, right? Like I know that when I first started, I tried to utilize my girlfriends like as part of my business, and like they would try to be helpful, but it just like their head wasn't in the same place as me. And they also didn't fully understand what I was doing. Like I often tell the story of when I came out with my first like information product, which was like this manual. It was like 150 pages. I did it in PDF, but I would print it out. And it was like the first product I sold. And it was about how to get clients on social media. So this is like going way back. And I'll never forget, I had it, nicely printed out and bound. And I went over to my best friend's house from fourth grade and I showed it to her and I was like, look, I have a product. This is so fun. This is so cool. And she was just like, oh, that's awesome. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. And I just remember being like, oh my God. But like looking back, I get it. Like she's not an entrepreneur. She didn't understand necessarily how important that was to me, but it was a little bit crushing at the time. Right. So just know that your people love you and it does come from a good place. It's just that they aren't necessarily in the same headspace as you. And I have found, Tanya, I don't know if you found this as well, but I have found lots of accountability partners in programs that I've joined myself, like masterminds that I've been part of and group programs that I've been part of. A lot of times the founder, the mentor in charge of the group would pair off people to be accountability partners. And there are people that I was paired off with like 10 years ago that I still talk to, and we still utilize that accountability between each other. So I think it's really huge. It's key.
I would have to say, I think you're one of the few people that actually ended up with a good accountability partner. Because I've been
Oh,
in these
yeah.
programs too. And it's amazing. Some I paid over 20K and they've like connected up with us with a group. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm running this accountability group. I get paid for this. I don't know about if I'm running it, right? Or I was dealing with other people's excuses and I was just like, I don't know. It wasn't. So I think what I've seen in most programs that say they have accountability is that it's just kind of like in any room, right? Or in a classroom. There's a certain amount of people who are going to raise their hands, right?
Yes.
And it's like less than 10%. And the
Mm.
same thing in those communities. It's the same 10% of people doing activities. And then everybody else is kind of in the background just lurking. Or like, when should I jump in? When should I get that support? And then you're wondering, like, how do I get it? And then even when you're in these groups, it's like, who's running it? And how are you going to keep yourself accountable? Because you really like everybody. Okay, it's funny. Nobody wants to be held accountable and nobody wants to hold somebody else accountable. Because how do
Mm.
you call a new person out of their BS?
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you're mentioning this. And don't get me wrong, I've definitely been paired with some people where it did not work out for the best as far as accountability. And that's like some of the risks sometimes when you join these programs. But the couple people that did work out well, I think it was like a longevity thing. Like it was so cool to connect with them and to still be talking to them years later. But yes, a lot of times you'd get stuck with somebody who, either they are just like not with it or they, you don't jive together, whatever it might be. And like all of this is leading me for you to share more with the audience about how you look at this topic and harnessing the accountability groups that you talk about. And so this is about you creating like the blueprint, right, to materialize that equilibrium between work and life. And so tell us more about how you got started with that, how that works, what does that mean to you?
So it's interesting. I still kind of cringe sometimes when I say I've been defying the odds for a while, and I don't believe in this self-made myth. I think it's a complete myth. Like there is no self-made. You always have in the group. And this, you're gonna laugh, but I literally had an accountability group to find my husband. I
Oh
had
my
an
gosh, I love that.
accountability group to have a baby. I had a less than 7% chance
Oh
through
my
IVF to have one. And then I just did everything in my life. I've always had an accountability group, and people are like, "Oh, you're so ambitious, you're so disciplined." No, 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 no. I found a group of people to hold me to my highest level and keep me accountable because you have to be like a complete silly person. I don't want to use a different word to think that your ride is going to be like this the whole time. No.
Yeah,
Professionals, everybody, they have a roller coaster ride. And you need people to, right when you're in the bottom, to tell you not to give up, to remind you of who you are. And so I think it's
yeah,
so important to surround yourself and find those people who are going to not let you off on your BS and
yeah.
also be there to encourage you. And that is hard.
Hmm.
And so each of these groups, I didn't have the same people for all of them. They all did like had different values and different things I needed. So I
Yeah.
think that the first part of finding your like partners first, find out what your values and what do you want, and then be really honest on why you might not be consistent or might not follow through or what's your default. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is like a lot of entrepreneurs, we rather do anything but marketing and sales in the beginning.
Yeah, right.
You'll do the systems, you'll do whatever you want,
Yep.
but not that. And you'll be like, I'm so busy. And then it's like, oh, wait, did send out this email or did you prospect? So those
Right.
are scenarios where you kind of say, okay, what is a game I'm playing and who else wants to play this game too?
Hmm.
Because I have actually been guilty where I'm like, oh yeah, I'll be your accountability partner. But then I was like, I wasn't really aligned to having that in my schedule right now.
Right. Right.
And so you have to
Yeah.
find people who are ready to go. So you're not just kind of like pushing someone through this, right? And being that
Yeah.
cheerleader, because that's kind of draining in itself too. It's kind of like hiring a VA and then you end up micromanaging them.
Yeah. No, you can't be with somebody who's kind of like half in, half out, and they're kind of like, sounds like a good idea. And you're right. I've been guilty of that before too, where I kind of like took on more than I should have because, I thought I had the room and then I realized I don't have the room in my schedule for that. So that's a really good point. And so I'm curious, you mentioned you had this for finding a husband, you had this for your baby. How did you find that? Like was that just something you were already involved in and you're like, "Hey, this is my goal," or can you share more about that?
Yeah. So for finding my husband, I was living in New York City and I was dating a lot. I was having fun. And then I was like, oh, shoot, I need to get serious. And then I analyzed what are my patterns? What are my biased?
Mm.
And so what I realized is I have a lot of bias. I didn't realize that. And so I looked for four of my friends who had healthy relationships.
Okay.
And then I had them swipe for me on Tinder. And
Oh, nice.
the rules were that if they swiped and the other person swiped, I would go on a date and I would have to go on the date 3 times and I would have to find something positive. Because I don't know about you, when I was on dates, the first thing I'm doing is looking for something negative and
Oh, yeah.
finding any little thing. So now this made it like a game, right? So I got to report to them. I was like, oh yeah, this
Yes.
person's great. Da, 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 da. And so there's so many ways where I would have swiped left on
Mm.
somebody and not given them a chance. And of course, there's more and more to it. Then I really kind of there was a whole process I had on that one. But I would say that one was a big one because like I wouldn't have swiped on my husband. Guess what? He had one picture that seemed a little outdated. I probably would have been critical and been
Right.
like, oh,
Yep.
is this a real picture? What's going on? Da da da. My sister ended up swiping for him because he loved to cook. And she's like, oh, that's really important in a relationship. And
Okay.
who would have thought? I would have never even thought that.
Right. Right.
And
I
then
love that.
we went on a date. And then it was like, and then something, I forgot what happened. Something happened the second date that I would have swiped left, but I had to go to a third date.
Oh,
And so here I am, married, 2 kids.
that's amazing. And I love that you called it, it's like gamifying. Gamifying can be very effective. So
Yeah.
it sounds like there was that going on as well. I love that.
You just make it
Yeah.
a game. Like accountability doesn't have to be hard and stern. It just is a game. You're just playing with it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then do you want to share a bit about like your journey as far as how did that happen? You have two kids now. So how
Yeah.
did you, how did accountability play into that?
So I had had a less than 7% chance. And so that accountability is a little bit different. I needed to find people to, there's a lot of variables that I don't even know how I was able to have two kids, right? When you have less than 7% chance.
Yeah.
But so if somebody told me to, I don't know, hop on one foot for like 1 hour every day, I think I would have. That's how bad I wanted a family.
Yeah.
Um, and what I did is there was like a protocol of what to eat, the fitness, the stress level, all of these things. And I wanted to be make sure I went along with it. So I had somebody hold me accountable to that and not be like, they didn't stress me out. They just reminded me of what the bigger game was.
Yeah.
Right. Cause there are times where I wasn't drinking, or there was food that's not necessarily great. And they would just be like, you're going to have a beautiful family day. And that was just it. I just needed that reminder to snap me out of it. And then another
Yeah.
thing was already people who went through the IVF process who had a kid and they just said you just need one embryo, and they were there when I got those results, and after the fourth round of egg retrieval, and they're like, none of these eggs are viable. I was like breakdown mode. I was like, oh my god, I can't, because every round is for most people who don't know, it's 30,000 plus
Wow.
each round. I went through 6 rounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I needed that. It's a different type of support and
Yeah.
that accountability to keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it kind of reminds me of when we were doing your bio and you had mentioned that you had done these marathons while dealing with, significant health challenges. I mean, how did you, I mean, that is grueling. Like for anyone who's in perfect health to go through these marathons and an Ironman. And so how did you make that work for you? I mean, was it just really more about the accountability, or was it more about the pushing yourself, or was it just multiple things that got you to that place where you did that and got through that?
So I didn't know I had osteogenesis imperfecta, which is brittle boned, until in my 30s after I completed the 70.3 Ironman and I fractured my hip.
Oh, wow.
Um, but what was interesting is people would say, like, if I was going to join a marathon, if I was going to do another marathon, I was going to do anything, I would still join a team. Even though I've been a collegiate athlete, a distance runner, I know exactly what to do, but I am not foolish to do this on my own. Just like
Yeah.
a marathon it's just like starting a business or moving forward. That's just like a marathon. You sign up, you get super excited, you're ready to go. And then there's longer runs. And then there's all these things, and it gets harder and harder. And then you have to say no to certain things because, like, you got to train. And there's just a whole nother mindset, a whole nother consistency. And then you have to have a coach to actually see where your blind spots are, especially if you want to hit a certain time. So it's just
Mhm.
like business. So
Yes.
what I did is, and that's basically how I came up with OwnersUP.
Yeah.
Here it was, my first business. I grew it over 1 million within the first year, continued growing it, but I was running and I was training for the Boston Marathon, and I had a team, and I was like, wow, I need this for my business. I need
Mm.
somebody that I can bounce ideas off of, peers in the exact same place, a coach that can spot things, and most importantly, I have a whole thing. When you run, you actually write down what's your distance, what did you eat, how did you feel, this whole assessment and self-awareness. And
Yeah.
then now you can use it through Strava. Strava has an app, any distance cyclist or runner has it. And you share that with your team and then your coach, and then your coach course corrects you. So
Okay.
this is something that, like, you can totally
Totally.
do,
Yeah.
and entrepreneurs need, because then when you're doing a program or you're doing something, sometimes you might find a mentor or somebody that's great, but then you have to go on their schedule and you have to have that
Yeah.
consistency. Like, say that you're writing this awesome, like how you said, 120-page document, and then you want somebody to review it. Who's going to review it? Who has the time?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
feedback is actually the fastest thing to get into action.
Oh,
Because I think
okay.
that a
Love
lot
that.
of people, they stop because they overanalyze, they become perfectionists. But if you got that
Yeah.
feedback quickly, you would be in action and moving so much quicker. and not
That's
be
a
afraid.
really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought about it that way. But yeah, I mean, if you get that feedback, it's like a springboard, right? To get you into that action. So many of us, especially those of us who are very like thinker brain, like I'm always thinking, I'm always like, analyzing, and that can create like that analysis paralysis. And a lot of people get stuck there. So that's a really good tip. And a great coach will be that person for you. And it's why I always have a coach. I always am in some kind of program, some kind of group. And it's been one of the biggest factors in my success is having that person, that mentor, that coach to go to, and to give you that feedback, especially in real time, is like so powerful.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. What would you say before we tell people how they can find out more about you and what you do? What would you say to somebody who is maybe listening to the show and they're an entrepreneur and maybe they're in a place of feeling a bit discouraged? They're feeling a bit like, I don't know if I can do this, or things seem really hard, or there's so many people out there who do what I do, and they're just kind of maybe doubting their abilities to do the thing, in business. Do you have any advice that you would give to them, kind of top of mind, as far as somebody who's finding themselves in that place?
Well, there's two kind of challenges you presented. One is like everyone's doing it. Why should I do it? I think of New
Yeah.
York City and pizza.
Oh,
There are
yes.
so many pizza places and even
True.
coffee places in New York.
True.
And then
Mhm.
sometimes you just go to one because you really like the energy, you like the food, you like just the ambiance. So
Yeah.
it's your special kind of message that might resonate. So we might be attracting, we might be going after the same audience, right? But the way I deliver it or the way you deliver it is going to actually attract different people.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. So you got to share your message. There is no monopoly.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is if they're going through kind of like being discouraged, first thing I do, if I'm ever in that, I have two recommendations for that.
Yeah.
One, help somebody else out. It's
Oh, I
an
love it.
instant uplifting of something.
Yes.
And you'll be like, oh yeah, I do have value. I am awesome. And then
Yeah.
you'll keep it going. Second thing is I have a list that I call I'm possible, which is impossible spelled. There
Yep.
is a list I remind myself of all the things I thought were impossible to achieve, and then I achieved them. And I also take a picture of it because I think that when you see a picture, a lot more memories come in than you can imagine. So I have a list that, like, if I'm about to go through, like, 2024 is coming up, I'm like, I need to come up with a really big challenge. And then when I come up with a big challenge, sometimes it's natural that we start kind of like making it smaller, 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 and maybe like, oh, I don't want to fail, so let me keep it small. But then if you review that list, you're like, I can do this. Look at all these things I've done before. And then you remind yourself that all those big things that you achieved usually came with some challenges, and you became such a different person because you made that, you like completed and overcame that challenge. So
Yeah.
have that list, have it on your phone. I have mine on my phone.
I love that. And actually, a mentor of mine had us do that in a program years ago, and I still use it with my own clients. Basically, it was the same idea. She had us come up with a piece of paper, and she said on one side, put once impossible at the top, once impossible, and on the other side, now easy. And so the first column is obviously the things that seemed impossible, and then you did them, right? And now it's actually easy because you achieved that. Like, whoa. And like I would put that up in my office on the wall. I think that you putting it on your phone, having you like look at that all the time and add to it is so powerful because you really see what you've done and were able to accomplish. So I'm glad you brought up that tip.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes they weren't easy, I would say. It was challenging. You almost have to
No.
be reminded of the
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah, no, sometimes you really you really do. Like, yeah, that was easy. Like I remember putting something on there about like the amount of money I had made this one month. It was like my highest month ever. And I was like, oh, now easy. And I'm like, I don't know if it's necessarily easy, but I was like, but I accomplished it and like I can do it
Yeah.
again. Yeah, yeah. Tanya, what else do you want to share with our audience before we close? And then also just let us know how people can find out more about you and working with you and where they can connect with you in social media as well.
You can follow me at Tanya C. Alvarez if you want information on the wrap or the free framework on how to hire your first virtual assistant. And so you don't have to micromanage and you can actually have them generate revenue for you.
Perfect. Love that. Yeah, DM Tanya for that resource. That sounds super helpful. And Tanya, thank you so much for being here with our audience today and giving your great strategies. And just kudos for you for having overcome so much. And I love the fact that you use accountability not only with business, but just with your personal life too. I think that's really cool and really inspiring and something people don't think about. You know, it's like, especially as an entrepreneur, we're like, go, 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 business goals. And it's like, hey, we have these big life goals as well. So I'm so glad you highlighted that for us. All right, everybody, make sure you go check out Tanya's stuff. We're excited that she was here with us today, and we will see you on our next episode. All right, bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could leave me a review on iTunes or share it with someone else who would find it helpful. To stay connected with me, please visit shesgotclients.com and sign up for my email list at the bottom of the page. Or feel free to share this episode on your Instagram and tag me at Christine G, and I'll repost you. I would love to share this with as many people as possible. I love you. Until next time, keep shining your light.